because everything's great when it's working. Acting is the easiest, most fun job in the world, and I guess directing is too, when it's going well. When it's not going well, that's where the rubber hits the road. It's like, how are you going to solve this problem? That's what movie making is.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. Today's episode takes us behind the scenes of director Viggo Mortensen's new drama, Falling. Mr. Mortensen also stars in the film as John, a gay man who lives with his partner and their adopted daughter in Southern California. When he is visited by his aging conservative father, who is searching for a place to retire, their two very different worlds collide. Falling is Mr. Mortensen's directorial debut. Mr. Mortensen spoke with director Matt Ross about filming Falling in front of a virtual audience. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
So we're here to discuss your film Falling. You and I, obviously, we know each other. We've known each other for some years, since Captain Fantastic. I don't know what to assume in terms of people having seen the film or not seen the film. So I think the best thing to do is just sort of have a not spoiler free. If you haven't seen the film, we may spoil things for you. Let's discuss the film and assume that someone's seen it and not worry about whether we're giving anything away. For anyone who hasn't seen the film, I'll just briefly say, however, that Falling is the story of John, who you play, who takes his father, Willis, from his isolated farm in, I think, upstate New York to California, as his father's in the early stages of dementia. And the intention is to relocate him so that he could be closer to you and your sister to take care of him in this stage of his life. That's sort of the most general sort of. I've seen the film twice now. I saw it earlier at a screening, I think pre-COVID maybe, and then I saw it again recently, and it's a really heartbreaking story about sons and fathers, about dealing with dementia, although it's not only that. For me, it was also sort of about how violence is passed down through generations or not. That seemed to be something. And then ultimately, I found it to be a film about forgiveness and about really the strength required to forgive. There's many beautiful performances, painful moments. It's unexpectedly very funny as well. And this is a DGA talk, so I also write, and though I'd love to do a deep dive on the writing process, instead, I really want to more focus on directorial choices and decisions. But I do want to start with the script. And just generally, I think what I'd like to touch on with you is, I'd like to talk about the script. I'd like to talk about pre-production, your casting process, rehearsals, production design, costume design, the shoot, acting and photography, and then edit. And then finally the post-production, the editing and the music, because you not only directed it and wrote it, you are also in it. You're one of the producers and you did the music. So I'd like to touch on those many things. I hope you also did, you made everyone yerba mates, as is your want, and also did the cooking, but we could talk about that. So let's start with the script. As you did write this, let's start there. We'll go through this quickly because I do want to talk about other directorial issues, but what was the genesis of the idea? Why this story? I know some of this, it's in your production notes and obviously knowing you a little bit, but I think as it is your first feature film as a director, what was it about this story that you felt compelled to tell?
Well, the reason this one is the first one at a pretty late stage in life to throw my hat in the ring, I guess, as a director. Not for lack of trying before. The main reason it was this one that was the first one was this is the first of the scripts I've written over the years that I found enough money, enough financing to make. I've been trying to do it.
That's the true answer always.
It's true. I've been trying to do it for 25 years and had some near misses, but never quite close enough. And even with Falling, it took several attempts, which is normal for independent filmmaking. I think with Captain Fantastic, you had to for several years before you got it. And maybe that happened with your first feature as
I
well.
had the same thing. I've been writing for a while, and there was a couple times where something almost happened and then fell apart and didn't. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So you don't know, and but things came together for this one. The reason I was actually trying to make another movie from another script I'd written at the time that I started writing it. I hadn't had in mind, as you usually, or I usually have, where you have an idea for a story, or something happens, or you read something, or something happens in your life, or you see something, gives you an idea, and you start writing it, and you do it in different ways. You might know where you want it to end, and so you work your way toward that, structure it that way, or you're adapting something. The one I had adapted of the screenplays I've written over the years, that's the only one that's not an original screenplay, the one I was trying to make. And at that time, this was 2015, my mom died. She had had dementia for several years. And it was after her funeral. I was flying, it was like 8-hour flight. I was flying overnight after the funeral. And I was just thinking about her a lot, naturally, someone I loved and love. And I didn't want to forget things that I'd heard at the funeral and things I'd been thinking about in the days leading up to it. When someone dies that you're very close to, you see their face at different times, images of them, things they said, things people said about them, things I'd heard the day before the funeral, stories that I was familiar with, but different versions of them. And I was thinking about how strange, how subjective memory really is, more a collection of feelings than facts, really, and all that sort of stuff. And I guess I just wanted to write everything down that I'd heard and was thinking about right now, because I knew that as time went by, as happens with all good and bad things, certainly all wounds, the sense of pain fades a little. That's what our body does for us. That's what our mind does for us. And I didn't want it to fade. I wanted to keep that wound open, I suppose, that flame lit. And so I just started writing down in a notebook because I couldn't sleep and my mind was going. So I was writing these things down. And then I looked at everything I'd written, still wasn't feeling like going to sleep. And I thought, that's interesting, because they were all out of order, time, place, points of view. I thought that could be a good short story or novella or something. So I started writing that, and by the time I landed, I had written basically the outline of the whole story. I had a story. And I put it away when I got home, and I went back to work trying to raise the money for this other project I was involved in or trying to get made. And then a few days later, I thought I should read that thing I wrote on the plane hurriedly, and I didn't expect it to be that good. I thought it would be like something you wake up in the middle of the night and you write on a notepad. You have an idea, you write it down, or a poem or a line, something. And you wake up the next day thinking, oh, I think that was really good. And you look at it, and generally, at least in my case,
it's terrible.
It's not that original. It's like, oh yeah, okay, well, if I'd been awake, I would have realized that was not even worth pursuing. But in this case, the structure I liked it. And it was basically the structure that ended up being what you saw, the movie Falling. And I just kept visualizing so much of it that I thought, well, maybe it's a screenplay rather than a book. And so in my sort of spare time, evenings, even though I was working on something else, I started writing it as an exercise. In this case, I was basically adapting something from my notebook. So I already knew where I wanted to go. And I just kept filling in conversations, dialogue. I started writing in all the dialogue. And that came naturally. And what happened when I was writing the story was that it was a fiction, using feelings, using some events from personal life. And I guess what I was trying to get at was the difficulty of communication. I'm not someone who, I don't think you are either, but I don't like movies that are about giving you answers. I like questions. I like just, here's a situation. What does this provoke? I'm not going to underline everything. I'm going to assume the audience is intelligent. And if they are interested enough, 10 minutes in, 15 minutes in, they'll join me and they'll start telling the story with me. And by the end of the movie, if they've watched the whole thing, it'll become their story as much as mine.
Your film does that very artfully. In fact, I was going to say that, you know, the structure of it is invisible. We've become used to a certain kind of, you know, Western screenplay structure, and I think it's there, but it's buried in a way that I think I see a lot in European films where you're not really sure what's going to happen next, and it doesn't follow. And it's very evocative, and it's very smart. And I wonder, with regard to, and again, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, but there's sort of two dueling time periods or storylines, right? There's the past marital history of the father character of Willis and his wife and his children, one of whom we come to realize is John later in life. And then there's sort of the modern day story of Willis visiting this son and this family in California. And how much of that structure was baked into the screenplay? And this is jumping ahead to the editorial process, but did it change? Is that something that changed, evolved, or was that?
Not a lot. One of the reasons I think is just because I had so much time to work on it and fine tune the script, including working with Lance Henriksen, who I went to, you know, very early, once I had the first draft. And so working with him and just thinking about, I mean, it was frustrating to wait, as it always is, but as it had been for 25 years, frankly. But looking back, I probably, to direct, I mean, what I learned from you and other directors in how to prepare a shoot, how to communicate with actors and crew members, how to get the most out of the time you have to tell the story you want to tell. Those things probably, that experience, learning from others, probably helped me so that waiting until I was 60 years old, I avoided maybe a lot of beginner's mistakes that I would have made, you know, if I'd been given permission 20 years ago or something.
I want to unpack that more as we go along, because I think that's something that was relevant for me too, having acted and observed many directors over time. And just like, you know, in any vocation, you know, every person is your teacher. They either teach you how to behave or how not to behave, and we all learn and we sort of steal from everyone. And but talking about Lance, you know, this idea, you're in the film, and I'm curious about if that was intentional or if you had originally wanted someone else. You know, this idea of like, you know, what's the quote? Directing is 90% or 80% or 90, whatever the percentage is, casting, right? And I did some research about that. And it's been accredited to so many people. Apparently, Altman did make a quote about that at one point. At various times, I think I found it's been, you know, John Ford and Kazan and all these people. But it's, you know, what it's, I think as a young actor that I always sort of bristled at that idea, you know, that somehow that's the solution. That it's not the actor, the director's work is only picking the actor, that somehow that's all there is. It seems so reductive, but I think that you know, it's funny looking at different films throughout history. You could, when you hear about so and so audition for that part, what the film would have been, because it would have obviously morphed and been something else. But you know, the Lance, that's such a difficult role. His work is so deep and rich and varied. He has so many gears. And I'm curious, so you knew him, you worked with him? Is that how you?
Yeah, I worked, I met him, well, just your previous question. So the structure didn't change that much, but we'll get into that later with the editing, from the beginning to what it ended up being. There were some adjustments, but Lance, I had met, I mean, I knew his work. I'd watched many movies he'd done, many strange movies, to be honest with you. And also the ones by more well-known directors, respected directors, Sidney Lumet, James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, etc., Catherine Bigelow, but lots and lots of movies that are, you know, horror genre, sci-fi genre, some I would say, unclassifiable in terms of genre. And I'd always found him riveting. There was something about him. It's not enough to just say, because he wouldn't have been able to do that consistently in all these strange situations. It's not just that he had and has this strong presence, voice, this, imposing face. It's his skill and above all his commitment as an artist, always, no matter how weird the stories, how small his, brief his appearance in any of these movies.
When you were writing it, did you imagine him? Did you have him in mind?
I didn't have anybody in mind when I was writing at all. And, but I knew his work, and I always thought he was, he was an unusual, very unique presence and a fully committed actor, no matter what he was doing. I never saw him on stage, but I know he did a lot of, he did work on Broadway and, regional theater. I mean, I think he did his first play 60 years ago and his first movie 50 years ago. But I met him in the fall of 2007, Ed Harris's second movie as a director, Appaloosa. And Lance had a part in that. And I got to know him then. You see someone on screen playing all these characters, you don't know what they're like. And when I met him, I found him, he was charming, he was friendly, he was a very good storyteller, good sense of humor, and very hardworking. He got the most out of his character, as I'd always seen him do on screen. And I really enjoyed him. He was one of those people I remember saying to him, as you do when you meet someone that you have a connection with and you like their work, you go, I hope we get to do something.
Right.
I hope we meet again, and on some set or something. And but I hadn't written Falling at that time, and there was no prospects, even though I wanted to at that time already, that I was going to be directing anytime soon, anything. Anyway, so when I had written it, I looked at it, I thought, okay, I can try to get X, Y, or Z actors in their mid to 70s to 80, well-known actors, that would help me get the money if they want to take a chance on this character, which is a very complex and mostly unlikable character. But and then I thought, what about Lance Henriksen? And the moment that thought came, it was like, yes. Then you don't know if they want to do it. You get dead set on a certain actor, and they may not be available. They may not want to do it, or they may just look at it and go, "This is just too hard. I don't know if I want to put myself through it."
Sure.
Whatever. And so I sent it to him, and I said, "I know this isn't something you've done. I don't think you have, and but see what you think." And he liked it a lot, and he was very honest, as he always has been. He said, "But it's terrifying." I said, because it's a lot of words and it's difficult, a lot of, you got to change gears and the dementia aspect. There's so many things to it. If you're going to play it no holds barred, it's a tough challenge. I know that, but I think you'd do something special. He goes, well, it's not just, there's a lot of reasons why it's going to be difficult for me, which I didn't realize at the time until I got to know him better further down the road. But he liked it a lot, and we started working. And
did he at that point bring you did he have a lot of feedback or notes that changed the script in any way? Was there?
Not immediately, but we talked and we started working a little bit. And then, he had some really good reactions, thoughtful comments about it. And
did he send you an email that when you printed it out, it was 32 pages?
Like I did to you. He didn't do that yet. But
which, by the way, was helpful. It was very helpful.
Yeah. No, that was to come. But he did it in a different way, not by email. He did it in person. It was great. And he did it in a more indirect way through stories about his own life, out of which came a few phrases that I said, can I use that? What happened? I raised all the money, and a year later, and I had started working on locations. I had my production designer, I had Marcel Ziskin, the cinematographer who shot it, production designer Carol Spear, and I was making progress, and we were, in pre-production, I would say. And then, as happens sometimes, that financier decided to do something else with his money, and I was left to apologize to everybody and say, I'm sorry, I sort of booked you for the fall and you're not available. And I went to try with another screenplay for a while, and then I tried with this one, and I was sort of making some headway. The final attempt, I called Lance. I was sort of staying in touch with him throughout, but I stopped pestering him and wanting to work together on it. And he was busy doing other movies. He works a lot, likes to work a lot. And one day I just decided, okay, I'm just going to do this. And so I called him and I said, Lance, we finally are going to make the movie next winter. This was in the spring. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. Are you still available? Are you still game if we shot, next January? It ended up being March, but, and he said, there was a long pause. And he said, yeah, finally. And I said, well, that didn't sound too enthusiastic. I really don't want you to do something unless you're, it's too hard a part. And I respect you. And I wouldn't want anyone participating if they really are not convinced that they want to do it. And it's fine if you've changed your mind, really, it's not a problem. He said, no. I said, I mean, we talked about this before. I know it's a hard part. And he goes, yeah, but it's not the part. It's where I'm going to have to go. Because I don't like ever to be caught acting. I got to live it. I'm going to have to go to some places that are difficult, that have to do with my childhood. And then I started to get to know him. He started telling me these stories. And those conversations that we had, long conversations, reading through scenes, like we would read a scene together, and then he would say, that reminds me of, and then there would be a half-hour long story, harrowing usually, sometimes funny, but in a really disturbing way, about, when he's a really small boy. And
did any of that end up in the movie?
Well, what happened, there was, for example, there was a phrase that as soon as I heard him say it, I was like, I have to have that early in the movie, because that is going to set a marker for the type of story we're telling and the kind of man we're going to get to know in Willis. And I said to him, I'd like to use that phrase. You won't be saying it. It'll be the younger version of you, played by Sverrir Gunnarsson, the Icelandic actor, who was really fine in the movie too. And I mean, difficult shoes to fill. Lance, younger, and Lance playing that Willis, younger. And so I said, I'm going to give him that line. And he was telling me we were talking about our children. And he said to me, yeah, I mean, it's such a beautiful thing when they're first born, and it's this flower, and you can't, it's just beyond description how wonderful it is, how it's just time stops, And I was so moved. I was holding this being, I was holding in my hands, this little girl, so precious, standing there in the hospital holding this baby. She's looking at me. And I loved her so much that I said, I'm sorry I brought you into the world so you could die. And I went, you said that to your baby?
That happens in the first couple minutes of the film.
Yeah. It's very early. I mean, the very first line of the movie is, Gwen, we're home, which I like. And it's like she's coming out of a dream, and then we're going to go into another kind of dream or whatever. But no, the baby's on the changing table shortly after that. That's the first significant line that you remember. And it's kind of, I said, well, you're giving me the context, so I understand why you said it from a loving place, but it's a very hard line to say. But I say I love it because for the character, it would establish his existential point of view, I guess, his relationship to nature, life, death,
Do these conversations you had with Lance influence your desire to play the part, or was that a purely logistical financial issue?
At that point, I wasn't going to. It wasn't my intention. I thought I'll have enough to do,
Yes, yeah.
Certainly. And since I was the originating producer and I didn't have an ally, which I wish I had, I wish I'd had someone early on as a creative producer ally right from the beginning. Maybe next time I will. But what were you saying? I forgot because I was looking.
Well, I was just asking if that. Let's talk about, I was talking about your decision to play the part, and I guess a logical question is certainly.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to. I wasn't going to just because I, too much to do.
Let's talk about that.
I just thought, yeah. I eventually, once it failed the first time round, and I was like, okay, I've been doing this for years with different stories, and it's always the same thing. So if I play the part, maybe I can attract that extra bit of money that we need, and to start shooting at least. And when I said to him, though, I wasn't being quite honest. I think the only time I've not told Lance the truth or the full story, which is when I said to him, we're going to start next winter. I didn't have any more money than I'd had the day before. I just decided I'm going to start, in the sense of, well, I'm going to start because I know if I'm going to shoot that next winter, I need this footage for the memories, of both men and some of the more, shared memories and some sort of objective, more or less memories. Not that there is such a thing, but I wanted to shoot in spring, summer, fall. And so I called up Marcel, the cinematographer, and Carol Spear. I said, let's go. We got a locations guy and let's find this farm. And we need to find one place because I don't think we're going to have the kind of budget where we can shoot the outside of one farm, the inside of another barn somewhere in winter and all that. So let's go to work and let's bring the camera we're going to use and the lenses and let's start shooting this material. Some of which I knew exactly what I wanted, and some which I said we're going to find things and we're going to have time and freedom to do it, and we'll get to know each other, in terms of photography and production values that we want and so forth. And so it was a gamble to just do it, but I knew I needed to do it. And I figured, well, if we act like we're making a movie, then maybe it'll be contagious and somebody will say, oh, it looks like they're making a movie. Maybe we'll join them. That was sort of the goal. So I wasn't forthright entirely with Lance. I didn't have the money yet, but I figured we would. I hoped we would. And it did work out finally. But although we did start shooting and I knew that we only had 2 weeks worth of money, and it was only 2 weeks in that we got the other 3 weeks worth of money.
Was the cast assembled at this point, or was this just you and the DP finding sort of some of the footage of, because there is a lot of footage of the environment up there. Was that when you shot that?
Yeah, I had Lance and I had approached Sverrier. I had those two. And I had Willis, the composite of Willis with those two actors, and they got together. We got together. This was another thing we did before I had the money, and I don't think I told Sverrier either that we didn't have the money yet. I don't remember, but I don't think so. But he was game, so we got together. We went out to visit Lance, and that was very instructive. Just seeing them work together, and I would read other parts. Lance read scenes that he wasn't going to play, the younger version of Willis, just so Sverrier could hear that. And vice versa, and Sverrier played, they did everything. They did all the Willis scenes, both of them.
So that was a kind of rehearsal process that you had.
Yeah, it was kind of extensive and it was interesting, punctuated by stories told mostly by Lance, which were great. And it was a great introduction for Sverrier, just to see Lance's body language and tone of voice and his rhythms. And I could already, without having to do anything, I could kind of see a fusion starting to happen where they were just approximating each other in some way. And the onus was going to be on Sverrier, obviously, but they were both doing it to some degree and sharing thoughts and physicality and all that. And that was great. And then, so we kept going. And then once we got into the fall, then I was like, I found some money. So I said, okay, let's go. And then the next role I wanted to cast, which was really important to me, was Gwen, the mother.
Sure.
And since the movie was inspired by Mama, that's the one character as far as anything autobiographical. In spirit, in her behavior, and the way she communicates with her children, she is that character a lot like my mother. And Hannah Gross did an amazing job of that and asked me lots of questions, and and she wanted to see photographs, and I gave her, I mean, we ended up there was lots of photographs of my brothers, me when we were kids, even though in the story it's a brother and sister, but family photographs, and my mother, different ages, my father. And she's brought in, and the other actors brought in. It was an amazing thing. There was the whole trailer, the makeup trailer, where, people hung out a lot, and there was a nice coffee machine, so people went in there. It was cold. It was a place to start the day, and it's like, for reference, this was the extended family that we all kind of shared now. And so that Hannah started, she doesn't really look like my mother, but I believed she was my mother, which is great. I mean, there was something about her.
I love the participation of the actors in that regard. It's something I learned from you when you showed up for Captain Fantastic. You showed up with a truck full of personal props and costumes, all of which we tried to integrate into the film, and I loved it. It gave so much depth and specificity, and that is there to be seen. And right. I want to change the subject because we don't have a lot of time, and I want to ask about your experience as both an actor and a director. And I've done that once or twice, and it's really hard. And I was just curious, like, did it free you in terms of an actor? Did you find it constrictive? Were you because in some ways I think you're so concentrated on so many other things, what the camera's doing, setting up the shots, working with the DP, that in almost like your own performance becomes the last thing you think about. And in some ways that can be very freeing, or it can feel like a burden. And I'm just curious what your experience was.
To some degree, that's true. It was freeing. I will say that, I was worried about it. I decided to go ahead and do it for a couple of reasons. One, because I thought it would help. Two, because as a producer, I could decide and did decide that that actor didn't need to get paid, and that we could use that money for the movie. And also I could continue the extensive work I've been doing with Lance, since my character is mostly working with him. I wouldn't just be trying to create an atmosphere in which he could do good work and be relaxed and try to help him in any way I could. As a director, I would be in the mix. I would be in the thick of it as an actor, trying to solve problems and get past obstacles as an equal, as an actor, as an acting partner to him. In some ways
you could direct him within by how you modulated the moments.
Yeah, to some degree that was true. But the thing that I was worried about, didn't end up being a problem, and that's not being able to pay attention to everything else, directing-wise, because we prepared really well with that crew, knowing that we had such short time, and because I'd learned that from other directors, is you can't prepare too much or too early for a shoot, because everything you do until then, until that boat leaves the harbor, is invaluable. Because once it leaves, there's no minor.
There's there's some wonderful quote about preparation will never stand in the way of spontaneity, or it will never impede your creative process.
Right? Yeah, that's true. And so we knew what we were going to try every day. Although, as I said the first day of the shoot, I said a good idea can come from anywhere. Said that to the crew and the cast, which I've learned from directors also. So please bring it on. Don't tell me tomorrow that this great idea you have for a scene we're shooting today, because it'll be too late. Just speak up. I'm never going to take it as an affront, a threat to my authority. I learned that working with you too. The way you invited collaboration was not only an inspiration and made people feel involved and care about the story, but it was also practical. It made sense. It helped you get the most out of your story.
Directing is a team sport. You can't do it yourself, and you actually not only need those people, they make the film. Everyone's voice adds to your story.
Yes, absolutely. And so, what happened was that we knew how we were going to attack each day, and open to things, changing. But we had the shots that we wanted to accomplish. I knew what the sets looked like, all of them. I'd been part of all the preparation process with all the departments, and so it wasn't it wasn't such a big deal. And the surprising thing, and just from the acting standpoint, is that it actually was easier than normal, and that I second guessed myself hardly at all compared to what I usually do.
Mhm.
In other words, and I think the reason is because as I'm acting with Lance and I'm looking at him, as a director, I'm listening very carefully to his tone, to everything, watching every gesture, and looking at everything around him
Mhm.
within the frame at all times. I'm just hyper aware of everything. And really, that's what you should be doing as an actor anyway, all the time.
Yeah.
The more you're fully focused on everything about the space you're in, and most especially the person or persons you're speaking to, the more relaxed you're going to be and the less self-conscious, and the more your reactions are going to be in keeping with what's really happening. You're going to go moment to moment. And so in a funny way, it was easier than I thought it would be, the acting side of it.
Did you rely on Marcel as to reflect on your performance, or was there anyone that you turned to? Did you rely on Lance at all? Did you have anyone to rely on that, to reflect on that? I mean, or was that?
I didn't. I thought about Ed Harris actually, because he on Pollock had done this, and he did it in Appaloosa. There was someone there,
Hmm.
a friend of his, who was a sort of an
Just to
actor,
sort of have a conversation about his performance.
teacher. Yeah, she was there, kind of guiding him and talking
Yeah.
to him after each take as needed.
Yeah.
I thought about it, but I didn't end up doing it.
Hmm.
And it was Lance or anybody else I was acting with. That was my guide.
Right.
Because as far as what the shots were and what the lens was, I knew what that was. So I knew what the frame was, but it was what I was getting from the actors. That was telling me, if I was, finding what they were doing compelling, and how it affected me was how it affected me. That was my gauge. Yes, I could look at a playback sometime, but I didn't abuse that because we didn't have time to constantly stop and do that.
Did
So
you and
no, I didn't.
Marcel talk about?
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, did you and Marcel, the cinematographer, talk about how you wanted to render point of view and memory, and the kind of how unreliable memory is? And because it switches sometimes between, I feel like, the point of view of John, and sometimes we're with John, and other times, like at the scene at the beach, we are completely with Willis. And did you guys, was that something you sort of found on the day, or was that something that you plotted out? Because it seems to be a very important visual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that runs throughout the film, and takes a degree of, I would assume, planning and thought.
It was planned, and it was mostly scripted. But like, for example, early on, the way that I introduced the family and the dynamic, the mother, the husband-wife dynamic, the father-son dynamic, and the mother-son dynamic, is through the story of the duck. What happens to that duck, right? From start to finish. Most of it's in the first third of the movie, and then there's that one last bit, which is eating the duck, which is at the end. And by then you really know who Willis is, so it colors how you look at that, his behavior, which seems more or less innocuous if you'd seen it early, but at the end you see the signs of what's to come, looking back, And that sequence, or that series of scenes having to do with the duck, not only introduces the family, and to some degree, and their relationship to nature, maybe even to life and death and all those things, like that first line that we were talking about earlier, that Willis utters to the baby. It lays down a marker. Okay, this is the family. This is the kind of situation you're getting into. It also is a way of introducing the way memory is going to be used. In other words, when it first starts, you're on an airplane. There's an old man, and he hears some ducks, and he looks up, and then he's fully there. He remembers that. So it's until the boy wakes up the next day and finds the duck is gone from the bed. It's all clearly Willis's memory. But once the boy wakes up, it's John's memory. And then I deal with that in different ways in terms of sound, even the score, even the choice of the camera. Like when the boy goes down into the kitchen, there's music, and there's this relationship with the mother, and there's a negotiation about the duck. Okay, I can pluck it. As soon as the father walks in, the music's gone.
Music
he's
that
like,
you wrote.
yeah,
What was the decision to be the composer? Because as well as, was it a similar one?
that was
Quite
a function
factual?
of, it was a function of the time that I had to wait also. I mean, it
Mhm.
was, no, it wasn't financing, although it was a lot cheaper because I didn't have to pay the composer.
Sure.
That's true. And because I knew, I mean, it was a function of so much time, having to wait before. So that was one of the many things I thought about, not only where and with who I wanted to shoot and how, and working on the script and just because I wanted to, as much as possible, try to avoid having a lot of scenes that I would cut out in the editing.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And so I was just working really hard to make it lean.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I knew some scenes were really long, unusually long for movies these days, almost like theater pieces, but they needed to be there. But still, I tried to finesse those as much as I could. And I was thinking about the music, and I was picturing what it would be. I was imagining, and I knew I wanted it to be piano based, and I knew I wanted it to be discreet. I mean, there's more music in the movie than one realizes, but and it's still pretty lean in some ways compared to some other scores. But I knew kind of what I wanted, and I was thinking about it a lot. It was just because I had that time on my hands. And by the time we started shooting, I already had a couple themes. And as we were shooting, I thought of a few others, and the rest I did while we were editing, so that when it came time when we'd finished editing, and had mixed the sound, and then I had to do the score. It wasn't like weeks and recording and an orchestra. It was me, Buckethead, 2 days, boom. We recorded everything, mixed, mastered.
It's funny. I didn't notice it so much the first time because it kind of becomes invisible and works on an emotional level. And then knowing that you had, after I saw it the second time, when I watched it, knowing that you had done the music, I was a little more aware of it. And it still has a kind of, there's an undercurrent there. And the piano is not it's just subtle. It's a subtle kind of tone that adds. We're running out of time, so I want to do a lightning round with you. Okay,
Yeah.
Super lightning round. I want to know what would have you done differently, having done it? Like just off the top of your head, what would you do differently next time?
I would have. Well, I addressed this earlier. I would have ideally someone with me that could help me with just logistics. Earlier on, a creative producer person, sort of right hand woman or man that would help me with that. And that wasn't like a mistake. It wasn't that I didn't want it. It's just that's what I would hope next time.
Yeah. Okay. And what are you most proud of?
I am proud of the fact that we got it made, really. I mean, and that it turned out the way it felt as we were shooting. There was one thing that happened very early on, the first few days, is because of the location, because of the snow, we ended up, there's a big argument scene that's late in the story where all the tension's building toward, right? And we had to shoot that just a few days in, which was hard. And what I said to Lance is, well, we'd have to do it sooner or later. It's never going to be easy. So let's just work on it and get ready. But we do have to leave it all on the field, because if this scene doesn't make us uncomfortable, it's probably not going to make audiences uncomfortable. It has to be uncomfortable to watch and listen to in order to earn how the movie winds down. And when that happened, there was already a good feeling with the crew. We had connected and we started on the right foot, and it started going well. When we did that scene, they were very moved. I mean, we finished and we were exhausted, and then I saw, and the people were crying. It was like very early on, and that was a kind of a turning point. And the crew was so with us all the way that the rest of the shoot, and they would share stories about their families, personal connections to what we were doing. It wasn't just a job for anybody.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That made a huge difference for the actors. I think they felt supported, especially the kids. It was like, wow, this is something, we're all in it together. And for me as a director, obviously having a crew be into the story that we're telling, very helpful. And I kept thinking, I better not mess this up in the editing room, because I want people to relate to it personally when we do it. And so I guess I'm most proud of the fact that the reactions from Q&As and things that I've done in different countries, different cultures too, has been that sort of universal connection that people have with it on a personal level. Sometimes very personal, specific family things. Other times it's more of a society thing, or the effort to deal with the thorny issues of communication. I like to say that it's another pandemic we have now. It's the other pandemic, bad communication or lack of communication. How do you deal with it? Are there people you can't talk to? Are there people who don't deserve to be talked to? Whatever you think, I'm going to present a situation where it's very difficult, and people have connected to that. And that's, I guess, what I feel most proud of.
You're a highly accomplished actor who's worked for many years in extraordinary films. You're also a photographer and a writer, and you write poetry and fiction, and a painter, and all these things that come into the directorial process can be part of it. I just want to end on what surprised you, because you're a very observant. I noticed this when I was working with you. You are aware of what everyone is doing, and you're also able to focus on your job. And so I'm curious, was there anything that surprised you about directing? Was there any one thing that you hadn't thought that was part of the job, or it hadn't occurred to you? Was there anything that you thought, wow, that's because there was for me, and I'm just curious if there was for you?
Not the job of directing, because I knew it would be hard. And I knew that I was going to, regardless of what other directors do, I was not going to be absent a single second of any part of the preparation, the shooting, the sound mixing, the editing. And, and I made it clear to everybody that it was going to be that way. And if somebody had said, no, that's not okay, then I would say, okay, well, then we shouldn't do it, because I am going to be a piano for you then. Exactly. And so I kind of knew what I was getting into. I knew it would be very hard. I have to say that it was more of an inspiration, especially the collective aspect of making the movie. It was better than I hoped it might be. I guess the surprise is the thing I was talking about earlier, is the connection. You can't count on that full connection, very sincere, almost very vulnerable in some cases, connection from the crew with what we were doing on a daily basis, Well,
they were your first audience. They were your first audience, and they were responding to the depth and the authenticity of what was happening in front of them.
Yeah. And I know that that's not necessarily going to happen every time out, to that degree. I felt really fortunate that on my first effort as a director, that I had a crew that was so behind the story.
Well, it's only going to get worse from now on,
I'm sure.
Well, that's a good place to end. I could talk to you forever, and I genuinely look forward, and I hope this is the beginning of a long secondary career, because you're an extraordinary actor, and it would be really sad if you stopped acting. But I look forward to your next film. I don't
intend to. Thank you. No, I don't intend to stop acting, but I have to say I really did enjoy it, and I do want to do it immediately.
I think every actor should direct, and every director should act. You really need to know. You really need to know the process of
I especially think that it's good for directors to act. I think people do have a misconception, and they think, well, if you're an actor, you're necessarily going to be a good director, or at least a good director of actors, and that is not necessarily true. I've seen actors direct well, and I've seen actors direct really badly and not really know how to communicate. I think it has to do with what kind of actor you are. If you're an actor that's curious, an actor that prepares well in order to then be open to what the other actors are bringing and the director is wanting, and you're open to that, that means you're interested in how other people work. Then you probably have a chance to at least know how to communicate with actors and with crews, because you've paid attention to how other parts of the job. But if you're an actor that just stays in his trailer, or just focuses on his or her lines, and I'm going to cry on this line, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to then yell, and I'm going to do a little jig. If that's your kind of thing, and it doesn't matter what the other actors do, you're going to do the same thing every take, you might be great at it. You might be an award-winning actor, and you might be very polite on a set, but you're probably not going to be, you're not going to be at an advantage in terms of communicating with actors, especially when they need help, when it's not working.
That's right.
Because everything's great when it's working. Acting is the easiest, most fun job in the world, and I guess directing is too. When it's going well, when it's not going well, that's where the rubber hits the road. It's like, how are you going to solve this problem? That's what movie making is. It's solving a series of problems. And
that's right. That's
and,
right.
And so
in real time as the floor is collapsing.
Right. And if you're an actor who you've never shown much interest in what the others are doing, how are you going to talk to them? You're going to have to start from scratch to some degree. So it depends.
Well, I truly look forward to whatever you do next, whether it be Falling Again, maybe.
No.
The Return of Falling. No, I know. That was a stupid joke, and it's not even.
No.
I look forward to what you do next, genuinely, and I hope one of those other projects that one of which I read, and anything else that you're kicking around. I
did write another one since, but it's in Danish, so that would be hard.
Well, not in Denmark, it may not be.
I mean, for you to read it.
Oh, yes, that's true. This is true. Well, Google Translate, done. I'll be like, the dialogue is really strange. It seems like it was run through a translator. All right. Well,
I wish you luck on your next one. I know you're gearing up for something too. So
thank
you.
And really well. Please, everyone, anyone who's listened to this, who has any interest whatsoever, it's a beautiful, really beautiful film, really heartbreaking and complex. And I was very moved by it. I think it's beautiful filmmaking, beautiful acting, writing. It's just a great film. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. And thanks for taking the time to do this.
It's my great pleasure.
Take care. And I look forward to seeing you in person as soon as possible.
Yes, that would be great. That would be great. Yeah.
Everybody out there, invisible, take care of yourselves and take care of those around you.
Be safe. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned in the coming weeks as we bring you discussions of films from Anthony and Joe Russo, Julia Hart, and Angel Manuel Soto. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.